Si je m'épanche sur toi.
This week's project is Simplicity 8222. We're going to make this little bralette up here, I think. We also got this cute version here. This one's just a pull right over your head kind. This one has the little hook and eye in the back. So we may revisit this and do both of them. It also has a pretty little underwear. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about supplies for this. You have to have a wide stretch lace. See how stretchy that is? It's important because especially if you're doing the pull over the head version, there's no fasteners. So if it doesn't stretch, it won't stretch to go over your shoulders and be put on. So this is the one I have. It calls for, it says 8-inch wide. And the reason is this pattern, which is wonderful, goes from a size 32 to a 42, cup size A to double D. So you can be a 32A or a 32 double D and make this pattern. You could also be a 42A or a 42 double D. So that's wonderful. You've got this huge range of sizes in here, which I'm just telling you, if you make your own undergarments, your own foundation wear, fit's the number one thing. Like, we want it to be beautiful, of course, but if you can't get fit, that's an issue. So I for all the girls out there who are teeny tiny around but a big cup size, or who are fuller in the rib cage but a smaller cup size, you finally are going to be, it's going to be easier for you if you want to make a pattern like this. It's wonderful. I measured the largest pattern size for the smallest size. So if you are a 32A, the smallest size of stretch elastic you can get away with is 6 inches across, which is what I have. Now, if you're a 42 double D, you cannot go smaller than a size an 8-inch wide. And it's harder to get. The wider it is, the harder it is to find. The way the pattern is set up, they use, you cut it so that your pretty edge, let me open this up, so this pretty edge is along the outer edge of the bra and underneath and that sort of thing. So you want something with pretty edges. Now, you could go buy large, like yardage stretch lace, and that would work. However, you won't have necessarily this pretty little edge everywhere you want it. If you see, it's a little hard, I know the picture is a little hard to see, but she's got this pretty little scalloping all along it, and that's, they've used this edge of the lace. So if you buy a yardage wide, you can definitely do that, and then you may want to get a little stretch trim to go over it. So that's one of your options. The other thing is it has to be lined, or it's, you know, they have it set up for lining. So let me show you some lining options. One of them is this netting. I've shown it before for some of the lingerie patterns as an option. The nice thing about this is if you still want a slightly sheer look but better coverage, you will get it with a netting. You can go with good old tricot knit. So here, and let me just tell you, this is an old nightgown. An old nightgown from, like, I don't know, 90s. It's not anything special. It's just a little over the head, very long, but it's full of great fabric. And you can see I've already cut some of it off. And I'm upcycling this fabric. This stuff wears forever, but it never dies. So this is definitely an option, this tricot knit. It'll give you better coverage. And see, I have an ivory, so you can see that it gives sort of a blush color if I go with this. It's a pretty bright peach color, so you can do that. But so look at how nice it lets the design stand out. So I really like the way that looks. And then you could also go with something like this. This is just a nice stretch jersey knit. This is going to give you the best coverage. It's a little thicker, but nice and stretchy. But this one's ivory, just so you can kind of see how the color affects it. You do not see the pattern as well with this one. It's pretty, and that may be what you want. You can kind of see the little pinky areas, but the ivory sort of disappears. So I think I am going to go with this one just because I like how it accents the lace so well. Also, if I wanted to make the matching underwear, you want to choose, personally, I would choose a lining for under the bra that I would use for the main part of the underwear, just because it keeps everything sort of copacetic. It makes everything look like it was meant to go together. So that's what we're going to do. For the bralette, that is the pull over the head version, it's view B. The only other thing you're going to need is elastic. I'm double checking. All right, I double checked. There is no hook and eye on the Racerback View B anywhere. I went through the entire directions. There's nowhere to put one. It shows it in the things that you need to purchase, but it's actually, there's nowhere to put it in, which I didn't think there was. Kind of confused me. But the other thing that you're going to need is a narrow elastic, because you trim out either bra with narrow elastic. This is, I'm just going to show you, this is regular 1/4 inch elastic, and this is not, do not get this. This is not what you want. You could do it with this, but it's not going to be as comfortable. What you really want is a plush back elastic, and that's really what we want. So get either white, like I'm going to just use a white if I can find it. That's what I don't have yet. So I can cut this out and I can get it partially sewn together, but I can't do the elastic part till I get my felt back elastic in. So I'm sourcing it right now. Wherever I end up getting mine from, I'll leave the information for you in the description. But you do want that. So you want a nice narrow felt back elastic, and when you sew it on, the felty side, the plush side, goes against your skin, so it's nice and soft and not irritating. Because who wants to make this beautiful garment and then put it on and it's like itchy and scratchy and uncomfortable? So that's our fun project. Super excited about it. And I'm going to go ahead and trace off my sizes now. So I'm going to be tracing off my pattern sizes because I definitely am going to be using this pattern for me and for both of my daughters. So I want to keep the integrity of the pattern I'm tracing off. And I'm going to go ahead and cut out. I will show you how I lay out the lace on the pattern piece. So those are the next things you're going to see. I'm cutting out, and I folded over my lace. Here you can see that where it's doubled over, and I need 2 of each of these cups, and this straight edge is the edge that's going to show. So I'm lining that up with the scallop on each one. See this straight edge? That's the scallop where I want my scallop, and then it'll get stitched together here on each of these. And I'm just trying to take advantage of all the scallop that I can. So I'm just laying this out, thinking ahead. Grab the pattern. Thinking ahead about where I want my scallop. So you see this is where my scallops are going to show. And then I've got this band here, so I'm going to make sure and put the bottom edge of the band along the scallop also. So you just kind of think as you go, and the directions do explain this also. All cut out. I've only cut lining for my cups. So here's my 2 cups and the lining. Here's the little racerback part. Here's the rest of the little strap. Here's the front band. And then here's the 2 back bands. This band. Okay, we're about ready to sew at the machine, but I wanted to remind you there is a right and a wrong to your lace. So when you are looking at your lace, this one in particular is re-embroidered or has sort of like a heavier texture on one side, and that is the right side. The reverse side is very smooth and you can't feel that texture. It's also not as defined with the design, and the little pink areas are less shiny. I'm showing you an inside piece that doesn't have the edging. Here's one with an edging. So here it is with the edging. That's the wrong side, and that's the right side. There is a difference. Just pay attention when you're doing it. The same with your knit that you're using for your lining. There will be a right and a wrong, so make sure you pin right sides together. So here's my lining pieces ready to go, and here are my lace pieces ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and sew my cups together. All right, I have my little cups sewn together. I'm going to show you one that's already pinned together. This is the inside, and because I didn't do it exactly like the directions had you put your pieces together, sew them together, and then all your seam allowance would be on the inside against your skin. And I sewed them separately so that the lining acts like a lining. So now you have this nice smooth part against your skin. This is the other side. You can trim out a little bit if you want to, some of that excess seam allowance but it doesn't show through that badly. And it looks fine. I think it looks just fine. So I've lined up my seam perfectly. So on the directions, it has you sew them together, make your seam, fold it over, and then they zigzag over the top of that seam. So you have the seam allowances on the inside plus a zigzagging stitch on the inside against your skin. I didn't do it that way. I treated the lining as a lining. So here it is with the 2 pieces together. And this is what they look like before they're put together. I'm going to show you the inside. Here's the little seam allowance. Get my face out of the way. There's the little seam allowance, like that. Flip it around. It's very pretty. And the same with the lining. And I did press these. I used my little tailor's ham and just press them real quick. You want to press all the seam allowance to the side. So don't press towards the center front, press towards the side. So that's what I did with all these. And then when you lay them on top of each other, everything's going the right direction and it'll lay great. So now we have our cups together. We're ready to move on to the next step. I look different. It's many days later, but my elastic came. If you are having a hard time finding supplies for lingerie making, bra making, that sort of thing, Etsy has wonderful shops. So head to Etsy. That's where I've been getting a lot of my things lately. This is a picot-edged elastic, and it has a soft felty side on one side, and the other side's just your regular, so nice and stretchy. I got an ivory. I also got some lavender lace and lavender elastic so that I can make another bra style that I want to try out also. So I've got some more to make. So coming eventually, we'll have a lavender bra or some other beautiful lingerie, but I'm super excited because I found everything matching at the little shop. This one is Stitch Love Studio is where I got this from. And they're on Etsy. They also have stitchlovestudio.com. Okay, so the pattern has us cut every piece out of our beautiful lace, and you have to just think ahead where you want your lace edges to be, where you want that pretty scalloped edge, so that when you sew it together, all of your outer edges are going to have this pretty little scallop. So all of them are cut out of the lace, and then they want you to go back and cut it out of the netting, which I showed earlier as one of the options. I did not cut everything out of netting. I'm going to just have lace, so it's more sheer everywhere but the cup, and I want that on purpose. I've got my two beautiful little cups. Aren't those pretty? And now we're going to sew the two cups together at the center front. So we're going to take our two little cups like this, and we're going to this whole thing is done at the sewing machine. If you have a zigzag sewing machine, that's all you need. You don't need a serger at all for this project. So we're going to go ahead and sew these together. And it also has us sew together our center front piece. Also, we're going to sew together the center front band. So I'm going to sew both of those pieces together, and then I'll come back and show you the next step. We're set up to do the little top stitch zigzag that it recommends over every single seam. So we just have the same zigzag we were sewing with. And we're just going to go across that seam. It makes it nice and sturdy and lay flat. All right, so here's the zigzag. After it's stitched, you can see how nice and flat it is. And that's it from the back side. Isn't that pretty? I think that's so beautiful. So you're going to zigzag. Every seam gets zigzagged again. This is what it looks like on the inside. It's actually very pretty. The thing you want to make sure of from the inside is you don't want your lining pieces to come beyond your scalloped edge. If they are, you might do a tiny bit of trimming just to get them a little narrower. And then I've done my center front is together, and it has a seam. I don't know why they went ahead and did a seam on the center front instead of just putting it on the fold and taking away that little bit of seam allowance, but that is how it's done, so that's what I did. So these are now ready to go together. The way the pattern has you do it, and it is a smart thing to do, push your seam allowances in opposite directions. So on the band, your seam allowance will go to the right, and on your bra, the seam allowance will go to the left, or vice versa. And that just makes it a little bit less bulky right here at this seam where they come together. So we're going to pin this band to the bottom of our bra to be sewn together, and then I can go ahead and take my back band. It has an upper and lower band, and I can sew those together, and then every seam we sew, we're going to go back and do that little tiny zigzag across it. So I'm going to go ahead and put those pieces together, and let me look at my directions. All right, I'm pinned together. So this is the front band to the cups. There will be a tiny bit of stretching the band to meet the cup. The cup is a little wider. That's part of the fitting. It's going to make it lay a lot nicer. And I'm going to give you just a real quick close-up. This is what the zigzag looks like. If you do it the way I did it. Now, if you do it the way the pattern has, all of your seams are going to look more like this, including inside the cup.
where you can see your raw edge and your zigzag. Okay, I'm gonna start stitching.
So if you're looking at your directions, and we're doing Racerback bra B, we've done 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the directions. I'm getting ready to do pattern direction number 5, which is putting the cups to the band. And then we're ready to start working on the back of the bra. And the back of the bra has us put the little Racerback together and the bottom of the band. So we're going to go ahead and put those things together really quick, and then I'll show you how they all come together. And because we're getting ready to do elastic, so we want to get these pieces together so we can start applying our elastic.
When you are laying out your lace, make sure that you line up your scallops for cutting, because if you don't, if you have your scallops off a little bit, when you go to sew this together, you could end up with your backs or straps or anything asymmetric. So you want to line up these scallops on top of each other. And I can't remember if I mentioned that when I was cutting out, so I'm going to mention it now. Look at how pretty everything looks, though.
These are the pieces that we have together now. I've got my entire little front, super pretty. This is the back band. And it's a little confusing. If you look at the pattern pieces, they look identical, the upper and lower back, but they aren't actually. The upper back is just a little, like an eighth of an inch. It's just a tiny bit longer and a tiny bit wider, but it's really close. So here's my upper back. I'm sorry, my whole back, upper and lower. And I put a little pin so I can remember from my upper from my lower. And then I have, here we are, these beautiful little V's, which are going to make my Racerback. There's a big one and a little one. And you press your seam allowances opposite directions so that when you put them together here, you don't end up with it too bulky. So now that's the next thing I'm going to sew is this little tiny seam. And again, top stitch it. Everything's getting a top stitch. And then it's going to look like this. And then I'm ready to start assembling. After this, the next thing is we're going to add elastic to the neck. So after I get this perfect, I'll show you applying elastic.
So here are all of the parts that I have together. Here's my bra front. Here's the Racerback. Here's the two little straps. And here is the back of the bra. So the next thing we're going to do is take our elastic, and this is a picot-edged felt-backed elastic or plush back, and we're going to stitch it on to this. Now it's going on this little neckline. There's a pattern piece that tells you how much to cut it for. It's not very much. There's not a lot of stretching. It's mostly for strength that it's there. So that's what we're going to do next. When you do this, this is going to sew on and flip over. So you want to sew with the plush up. So then when it flips over, the plush is what's going to be next to the body. So we're going to stitch this down. This is going to get a double zigzag. So it's going to get stitched one time, kind of close to this picot edge. And then when we flip it over, and we're sewing right side, it's sewing on the right side of the Racerback. When it flips over, we're going to zigzag it again, and that will finish off that edge. And you can either sew it so the picot shows or sew it so the picot's hidden. That's up to you. When sewing down the elastic, you want to stitch close to this edge so that when it flips over, let me get this, so that when it flips over like this, your stitching is close to this edge. If you stitch on this outer edge, you're going to end up with a bunch of elastic showing. So you want to stitch close to the inside edge of your elastic. All right, here it is stitched. You can kind of see the gather a little bit better now, but you can also see how that's going to tuck up nice against the neck and give you a little stability. Now we're ready to sew this to this. So we're going to line this up down the middle, right sides together, and I'm actually going to applique it on like this. So I'm going to lay it behind and just top stitch it on and give it a pretty little treatment. So it's going to look like that. I'm just going to do a little zigzag right across there and then onto the straps. All right, we're pinned on. Look at how pretty that is. And I'm just going to go right across here to stitch it on.
We're to the part where if you need to try this on, now's the time to do it. We have got a front put together and we have a back put together. And I just have my little straps pinned on. You could go ahead and sew these at the top if you wanted to before trying them on, then I would baste together your side seams before doing your zigzag and your top stitch. Just do a long baste, slip it on and see how it fits. Because if it's too wide, now is where you would want to take it in. Time to fit it. If you don't need to do that, time to finish putting it together. So I'm going to now sew my fronts to my backs. I'm going to do my little straps, do our side seams. I will tell you what I did too, and I did it while it was flat, is I went ahead and put the little, bow on the front, a little decorative bow, just because it's cute, and I just did it while it was nice and flat and easy to sew. So now we're going to sew our little straps. Got them pinned on when you sew to the back, and then you flip it up and top stitch it, and then we will sew our side seams together, and the same thing, zigzag, top stitch your zigzag, and then we applique our straps to the front, and it's done. Now the pattern, the last thing they have you do, if you did the netting under every piece, then they have you go around and top stitch down, or sort of like applique down the edge of the netting. Now I only did on this piece, so I went ahead and stitched it down first because I don't have any top stitching I need to do after this point. But if you did the complete underlining of the entire thing, the very final thing you're going to do is go all the way around this outer edge and stitch together these two layers so that they don't separate. Since I only have, this is my only part, I've already stitched it down, and it's nice and tight and together. So, and then you can also, at this point, trim back if you need to. You don't want any of that lining showing through. All right, I'll be back in a few minutes to show you where we're at.
All right, it's completely together except for this last little bit of the strap, and the strap goes underneath like this and is just stitched down, just stitched across there, and that's it. Then our little bra is done. And this is, once you know your bandage width is right, this is the other place that you can adjust. So if you need to make it a little tighter or a little longer, right here is where you can do that adjustment.
Look at how beautiful this little bra is. And I like this pattern a lot. It's pretty straightforward to put together. The directions are good. It went together exactly like it should. This is the only little part that has elastic in it. You could easily add more elastic. If you find that you just need a little extra in the band, you could put a little elastic in this band. You could put a little under the arm if you need it to tuck in a little bit. So I really like it. I'm going to go put it on the dress form and show you what it looks like on. Isn't this beautiful? Look at how pretty this is. I did make it in a small size because this is actually for someone, just not me. But look at how pretty the back is. It lays nice. I will say this, of course, like I said, this is the smallest size. I had a hard time getting it over the broad shoulder of this dress form. Otherwise, though, it went on great, and it's super pretty. A couple things to watch for when you're lining up your strap here. Line up this center seam of the strap with the center seam of the cup. It just makes it look a little more professional. But otherwise, I think this is a great, fast little pattern. It took me no time to sew together. You could easily make yourself a bra and underwear set in an afternoon, no problem. So I really like it. Recommend this beautiful pattern. I'm going to talk to you about a few things to troubleshoot when you're working with things like this. Make sure when you put your fabric under the foot of your sewing machine that the fabric is behind the needle. Even kind of hang on to the tails of your threads when you take your first stitch or two. Because of the lightweight and holiness of this fabric, it tends to want to go right down into the throat plate of the machine, and you could have problems. You don't want your machine to eat your fabric. So be careful about that, especially when you're doing laces. Even if you underline it with the netting, that gives it a little bit of extra stability, but not a ton. So it's very easy for it to push it down. If your needle is dull, it's going to just shove it down into your throat plate and cause lots of problems. So start with a good sharp needle. Depending on what you're sewing with, you may need a ballpoint needle. Make sure that your thread isn't too thick, that you have the right type of thread. Just a good general purpose Gutermann or Mettler sewing thread is what I would recommend for this kind of project. Be adventurous. Do try this. I really, really like it. And if you get a pattern that fits like this and you're happy with it, you can make it over and over and over again. I do recommend going to Etsy to find your findings for this sort of thing because they just have so much available for you. All right, we'll see you next week for another project.
Si je m'épanche sur toi, c'est que je rêve de toi et du soir.